We picked up the SOS from a ship that had been dead for 60 years. I heard it with my own ears, on modern gear, on a frequency nobody uses anymore. Container run from Jacksonville to San Juan, straight through the so-called triangle. Third mate let me sit a midnight watch because I couldn't sleep. I wasn't trying to be heroic. I was wired and pissed off for not sleeping. Bridge was routine. Screens up, autopilot steady, radar clean. I sipped bad coffee and stared at the logs. Then the HF set on the bulkhead crackled to life. Not our channel. Not any we were monitoring. No tone, no digital call, just hiss that tightened into a voice like it had to fight its way out. Old, warbly, clipped, panicked. Mayday, mayday. This is USS, then static, then engines flooded, position unknown, request immediate assist. I froze with the cup halfway in my mouth. HF gets garbage all the time. Drunk fishermen, guys arguing, random music, but this sounded like museum audio. The panel read, unknown source. No call sign, no MSI, nothing. I checked the frequency twice and felt my skin crawl when I realized it was sitting on a band nobody on our route used unless they were bored or desperate. The name that kept trying to break through the static hit a nerve. I'd seen it in some documentary at 3 in the morning, the kind you half believe because you're half asleep. A collier that vanished in 1918. Norek, no Bodius. Just a line in an old report and a bunch of theories. I leaned in and listened. The message looped, but it didn't loop clean. Same bones, different stumbles. Sometimes the man swallowed, sinking like he couldn't force it out. Sometimes it got as far as "we're going due" before the signal buckled. I called for the mate. He came in with that annoyed look officers get when you bother them for anything short of fire. He started to say something sharp, heard the voice, and the color drained out of him. He didn't ask what channel. He didn't ask if it was a prank. He just stood there, shoulders tight, eyes locked on the HF like it owed him money. I said it was some old ship, that it couldn't be real, that maybe someone was rebroadcasting. He told me to stop talking and keep my hands off the transmit. That pissed me off. A distress call is a distress call. I'd sat through enough drills to know you don't get to cherry pick who you help. So I keyed the mic anyway. I gave our position, said we had traffic, offered relay and assistance. The instant I said our lat long, the bridge died. Not a flicker, not a slow fade. It was like someone snapped a breaker for the entire world. Lights out, radar black, GPS blank, AIS gone. The ectus froze mid-refresh. Even the analog compass needle stopped like it got nailed to the glass. The only sound left was the engine far below and the HF hissing like it was pleased with itself. I slapped the console, then the breaker panel, then hit the bridge alarm out of pure reflex. Nothing. I tried VHF. Dead. I tried the satellite phone. Dead. The mate grabbed my collar and shoved me back from the radio hard enough my shoulder hit the chart table. "They're not ours," he hissed. "You don't answer what isn't in this time." That line hit me wrong, like he'd rehearsed it. I jerked away and told him to quit acting like a lunatic. He snapped back that I'd just invited something aboard, that I'd handed it our location like a gift. I went for the captain's stateroom phone out of stubborn panic, like rank could fix physics. The handset gave me nothing but dead weight. I tried the internal system. Dead. I tried the engine room call. Dead. The mate blocked me with his body like I was about to do something worse than break equipment. Outside, the horizon vanished. No stars, no distant glow, just black. The bowweight glowed faintly like we plowed into ink. From a static, other voices started bleeding in, stacking on top of each other. Not one call, dozens. A pilot screaming about a dead compass. Someone counting fuel minutes like a countdown to execution. A woman sobbing numbers that didn't fit any chart I knew. A man praying, then coughing, then praying again. The audio didn't sound modern. It sounded like different decades jammed into one speaker. Every few seconds, the original Mayday shoved its way back through, like it was the anchor holding the rest. I went to the front windows and got nothing but black, like the world got shut off. My watch said we were in it for 13 minutes. I know because I stared at that second hand like it was a lifeline. The mate kept one hand on the dead controls and one hand braced on the console, jaw clenched, breathing through his nose like he was trying not to vomit. I wanted to wake the whole ship. I wanted hands on deck, eyes everywhere, someone else to confirm I wasn't losing my fucking mind. I didn't move because some instinct told me noise wouldn't help and movement might. At one point, the Mayday voice sharpened and sounded closer, like the man was right outside our bridge door. I heard him drag air in between words. I heard panic leak through his discipline. That's what made it worse. He sounded trained. He sounded real. Then as fast as it died, everything snapped back. Bridge lights flared on. Radar spun up. GPS chirped like it had rebooted. Compass spun once and settled. The black outside peeled away and the stars were back where they belonged. The HF went quiet like nothing had happened. I checked the system logs with shaking hands. According to every official record, we'd lost less than a minute. No alarms, no power dip, no fault. It made me furious, like the ship itself was covering for what it had done. My coffee was cold in a way that didn't match the log. Not lukewarm, cold, like it had been sitting there forever. I reached for the mic again, more careful, more scared, and the mate grabbed my wrist and squeezed hard, nails digging through my sleeve. He didn't shout. He just said low, enough, like it was an order he'd given before. I told him to explain himself. He told me the only explanation that mattered was I shut up, and we finished the run. I spent the rest of the watch chasing proof. I pulled timestamps, opened hidden menus, ran self-tests, checked breakers even though everything was normal. It felt like trying to catch smoke in a jar. At daybreak, I cornered him again. I said this had to go in the notes. He told me to be smart, and it came out meaner than it needed to, like he was angry at me for not already knowing. Next port, I tried to pull the HF recording. The file showed as midnight, corrupted. Tech later shrugged and called it a glitch. I pushed, asked him to dig deeper, asked for raw buffers, asked him to pull the set's internal memory. He told me HF was messy, that storage corrupts, that I should stop chasing ghosts. The mate stood in the doorway while I argued and didn't say a word, just watched me like I was about to step off a roof. I tried the chief mate next. He listened with that flat face officers put on when they smell paperwork. He asked if anyone got hurt. He asked if cargo shifted. He asked if we took damage. I said no, and he cut me off and told me to stop making problems where there weren't any. On paper, the mate told me, calmly, that if I mentioned any of it in my report, I'd never work that line again. He didn't threaten me with fists. He threatened me with quiet phone calls and my name getting tagged as unstable. I called him a fucking coward. He didn't flinch. He just looked older and said I'd understand once I needed the paycheck. When I got home, I looked up the old ship again. I wanted some official crack in the story, some record that admitted a Mayday existed. There wasn't one. Last transmission log for her was weather fair, all well. No distress, no flooded engines, no position unknown. Just neat words like she vanished politely. That messes with me more than the blackout, because it means what we heard didn't make it into history. It means the call lived and died in the dark with nobody answering, and when I answered, it didn't bring help. It brought attention. I still catch myself doing dumb little checks like turning the volume down before I sleep, like I'm afraid the radio is going to wake up again. Some nights, I wake up convinced I still hear that loop starting again in the dark. Mayday, Mayday. And I wonder how many voices layer over that stretch of water, waiting for any idiot with a live mic to drag their echo a little farther forward. The pilot covered the GPS with a folded chart when the compass started spinning. That bothered me more than the needles going wild, because the needles could be busted, but that move was him deciding I didn't get to see what he was seeing. I was in the back of a 6-seat charter, knees jammed into the seat in front of me, headset squeezing my skull, ocean chewing under us like it didn't care. The cabin stank of hot vinyl and fuel, and the engine droned so steady it felt like it owned the air. I'd hitched the ride because I was cheap and impatient. Nassau to Fort Lauderdale was supposed to be an easy hop, and Harris made it sound like nothing. He was the friendly pilot at the little counter, mid-40s, neat shirt, sunburned neck, the kind of guy who smiles while he sizes you up. In the lounge, he cracked jokes about the Bermuda Triangle, said it was all bad math and bad Navy, said people love a mystery because it lets them blame the ocean instead of themselves. I laughed along like an idiot and signed the waiver without reading it. He rushed the pre-flight. Walk around looked like a chore, not a ritual. When we climbed in, he shut the door hard and settled in like this was his living room. He flicked switches, got the engine turning, and started talking to the radio in that calm pilot voice that makes you relax even when you shouldn't. For the first part, it was normal. Bright water, sun on the cowling, the kind of flying where you can almost pretend you're in a car. Then the world went flat. It wasn't a storm rolling in. It was like somebody wiped the horizon clean. 1 second, I had blue in a crisp line where ocean met sky. The next second, there was no line at all. Just gray in every direction, no texture, no depth. The water turned dull like metal. The sun didn't disappear, it just stopped feeling real. My eyes kept trying to find the edge of things and failing. Without a horizon, my stomach started doing that slow, floaty roll like a bad elevator, and I had to stare at the wing strut just to keep my brain from panicking. The compass car drifted, then spun, then steadied, then drifted again like it couldn't decide what north was. Harris tapped it with his knuckle and swore. He leaned in, stared, then flipped the GPS screen off and slapped the folded chart over it. He said instruments glitch around here. He said he trusted old school. He said it like he was announcing he'd found a shortcut. He didn't cross-check. He didn't call it in as an equipment issue. He just hit it and kept flying. My hands went cold. I watched the fuel gauges and started doing dumb math with no numbers. Needle moves down, time passes, needle moves down. The altimeter twitched in little nervous jumps. My ears popped and popped again. Every time the plane hit a tiny bump, my stomach jumped like we dropped 100 feet. Miami Center came through his headset, and he answered like they'd interrupted him. They asked for position. He rattled off coordinates. They came back sharper, telling him their radar tag didn't match and kept sliding. Sliding. Like we were a sticker on a screen somebody couldn't pin down. They told him to turn west. He insisted we were already headed to the coast. He said their gear was acting up. They said his track looked wrong. He said he had it. I could hear Miami switch from casual to serious, the way they do when they stop humoring you. They asked him to verify heading, asked him if he was able, asked him his fuel on board. Harris brushed it off, said we were fine, said the compass was acting cute. He kept one hand on the yoke and the other on knobs, twisting too hard, flipping between radios like if he found the right setting the world would behave. He pulled a breaker and shoved it back in. At one point, he pressed the chart down harder over the GPS, like it might glow through and embarrass him. Miami repeated the heading slower, like talking to a drunk. Harris repeated that he was fine, voice too loud, like volume equals truth. I stared at the fuel again and felt my throat tighten because the gauges didn't care about pride. Behind his seat, half stuck under the console, I saw an old laminated search map for Flight 19. Scratched lamination. Pencil circles, question marks. It wasn't a souvenir. He kept glancing down at it like it mattered more than the live data, like it was a lucky charm. That's when my fear turned into anger. He wasn't being old school. He was being superstitious, and superstition doesn't burn less fuel. My fingers tingled, then went numb. I couldn't get a comfortable breath. The headset clamped my ears, and every radio hiss felt too loud. Harris snapped something at Miami, sharp enough that even through the bleed, I could feel the attitude. Then, without even turning, he barked at me to sit back and let him work like I was the problem. Miami's reply came back clipped and patient, like they were trying not to light a fuse. I leaned forward and said, "Just follow their vector." Harris didn't turn his head. He snapped back, "You want to fly or you want to get home?" He said home like it was something he could gatekeep if I annoyed him. Something in me flipped from panic to pure, hot refusal. I unbuckled. The click sounded loud as hell in that tiny cabin. Harris's shoulders tightened like he felt it. I leaned up between the seats and reached around him. He blocked me with his elbow, casual and mean. I shoved past it anyway, and my brain screamed that I was about to get hit by the only guy who knew how to land the plane. I didn't care. I flipped the fucking GPS back on. The screen lit up, and it was wrong in a way that made my stomach drop. Our track line ran almost parallel to the coastline, not at it. We weren't cutting toward Fort Lauderdale. We were sliding along, drifting past. Another 20 minutes, and we'd have been past the point where turn back still sounded sane. Deep empty blue. No landmarks, no margin. It wasn't the triangle. It was a man covering a screen because he didn't like what it said. Harris went dead quiet. No apology. He stared at the GPS like it had insulted him. For a second, I thought he'd shut it off again just to save his ego. Instead, he banked hard, so hard my stomach tried to exit through my spine. The belt bit into my hips. The engine tone tightened just a hair. A pin clattered onto the floor and rolled back like the plane had tilted into a different world. Miami Center came on immediately, like they'd been waiting for him to stop bullshitting. Their voice sounded relieved, and that pissed me off too, because it felt practiced. They gave him the updated heading and altitude. Harris read it back without arguing, flat and short. The gray didn't lift right away. We flew their heading, and the compass still drifted like it wanted to spin. I stared out the window until my eyes hurt, looking for anything that wasn't gray. I kept checking fuel like it was a countdown. Harris didn't look back at me once. He kept his jaw set like a man driving home after running a red light, pretending the near miss wasn't a near miss. Then the coast showed up under the haze. Dark smear, then a line, then actual shape. The world got depth again. My lungs finally took a full breath without me forcing it. Harris started talking to approach. Other aircraft, normal voices, normal procedures like we hadn't just been nowhere. We landed with fuel in the don't ever do that zone. The wheels hit and rolled out, and my hands still shook even after the engine wound down. When he opened the door, warm air and jet fuel smell rushed in, and the ramp looked bright and stupidly ordinary. On the tarmac, Harris stretched and held out his hand like we'd just done a Sunday drive. I took it because my body was still on autopilot. He gripped hard and said, "Don't tell the company about the compass. They spook easy." I wanted to walk into the office and report him. I wanted to point at that Flight 19 map and tell someone this wasn't a cute quirk. It was a pattern. Instead, I grabbed my bag and got the hell out of there. I told myself nobody would listen. I told myself it would turn into my word against his. The real reason was uglier. I'd survived, and survival makes you selfish. I didn't want him angry, didn't want my name floating around a small charter outfit where everybody knows everybody. I never reported him. Still hate myself for that. I kept telling myself it was a one-off, that he'd learned his lesson, but his face didn't look like someone who learned anything. It looked like someone who got away with it. Every time I see a headline about a missing little plane over open water, I hear that compass spinning again, and I picture a folded chart covering a screen that's trying to save everyone. Somewhere over that same patch right now is another pilot who thinks he's smarter than his instruments, and some poor bastard in the back who doesn't realize he needs to fight his way into the cockpit to get home. The captain turned the AIS off right after we crossed the line he'd drawn on the chart. Not a shipping lane, not a border, just a faint pencil triangle with Fun Zone written in the margin like a joke. We hauled Freight Miami to San Juan. Rust bucket for crew, one captain who drank too much and talked about insurance too often. He'd corner you and run his mouth about policies, surveys, deductibles, like sinking was a normal maintenance item. A week earlier, he'd asked me, dead serious, how long it takes the Coast Guard to respond out here. I said it depends. He nodded like he was taking notes. I should have quit right there. That night, the ocean looked calm, the kind of calm that makes the ships sound louder, because nothing outside is covering the noise. No storms on radar, no traffic close, Just our own engines and that slap of loose gear you swear you'll tie down next trip. Then he started flipping switches. He cut every beacon, AIS, radar transponder, even killed the A-perb for maintenance. He said we were invisible now. I told him, straight up, that's not funny. That's how people disappear and never get found. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue like a drunk. He just stared at me with that tired smirk and told Ramos, our engineer, to go below and check the bilge for that leak. Ramos hated him. Everybody knew it. Ramos also didn't scare easy. He grabbed his light, muttered a curse, and went down anyway. The hatch clanged shut and the sound kept ringing in my head like a warning bell. 5 minutes passed. 10. The pump started cycling more often. I checked the panel and saw the numbers creeping the wrong way. I leaned over the hatch and the air coming up wasn't hot diesel air like normal. It was sharp, salty wet. I yelled his name. Nothing answered. Lee wanted to go down. Javi wanted to stay put and not get on the captain's bad side. I went down a few steps, just enough to see the ladder disappear into darkness. Something moved down there, not a person, more like water shifting in a tight space. I backed out and told the captain we were going to check on Ramos. He blocked the hatch with his body and said, stay topside, like we were children. When Lee tried to push past him, the captain slammed the hatch and dropped the locking bar. He actually locked us out of the engine room on a ship that was taking water like he was protecting a secret. I grabbed the key ring that hung by the chart table and the captain snatched it back, hard enough to cut my knuckles on the bulkhead. He said if we went down there, we'd make it worse. Then he stared at the pencil triangle on the chart and tapped it with a finger, like he was proud of himself. I remember thinking, he's not lost. He's exactly where he wants to be. 20 minutes later, the engine room door banged, and the captain limped out alone. His coveralls were splattered dark from thigh to chest. Not oil. Oil shines and smells. This looked thick and dull. He wiped his hands on a rag and said Ramos slipped. In dead calm, with no thud, no shout, no anything. Then he ordered us topside to search like Ramos was a missing toolbox. Lee started screaming that we're calling for help. The captain raised the pipe wrench and told him to calm down or he'd put him down. Lee didn't calm down. He kept pointing at the locked hatch, yelling that Ramos might still be alive down there. The captain's face didn't move. He said he's not, like he'd checked a box. I went to the bow and saw the list in the waterline before anyone screamed. The bow rode a little lower. The deck felt heavier under my boots. The pumps thumped fast, like the ship was sprinting in place. I told the captain we were taking on water, and he didn't even look at the gauges. He just smiled and said, "Pumps got it." I said, "No, you opened something down there." His eyes brightened like I'd finally caught up to the joke. He said, "Ships get lost here all the time. Paperwork writes itself." That was the moment I stopped seeing him as a drunk asshole and started seeing him as a man who'd already decided we were dead. Dead crew doesn't argue about logbooks. Dead crew doesn't tell investigators who killed the beacon. I ran for the bridge console to flip the A-perb back on. The captain beat me to it and ripped the panel open, showing me the cut wires like a magician showing an empty sleeve. He said, "Maintenance." I tried a sat phone anyway, the old battered unit we used to check in with dispatch. No signal. The captain laughed and said the antenna acts up in the fun zone. Javi started praying under his breath and then got mad at himself for it. Lee stepped in again, calling him a fucking murderer, and the captain swung. The pipe wrench caught Lee's forearm with a dull crack. Lee dropped, howling, clutching like it wasn't lined up anymore. The captain stood over him, breathing hard, and told us to cooperate. Not shouted, said it calm, like he was reading a checklist. I tried to crawl past him toward the fixed radio, but he kicked my ribs and sent me sliding. I remember thinking, stupidly, that my ribs sounded like a cracked plate. I grabbed the handheld VHF anyway and hit channel 16. I got one word out before the captain lunged. He yanked the antenna out of the set, tossed it overboard, then swung the pipe at my shoulder. I ducked, but it clipped me and my arm popped like a joint being unplugged. Pain shot up into my neck and down into my fingers. I tasted blood where I bit my lip to keep from screaming. Javi fumbled for the life raft release. His hand shook so bad he kept missing the pin. I got one good hand on it and pulled. The captain stomped toward us, pipe raised, and I thought, this is it. He's going to beat us until we stop moving, then open the rest of the valves and watch us sink. Then the weather snapped. Not a normal build. No gradual wind. It hit like somebody threw a switch the same way he'd thrown ours. A black wall rolled over the ship, wind screaming, rain slamming sideways, the deck turning into a skating rink. The ship yawed hard, and the bow dropped into something deeper than it should. That six-stomach lift, like an elevator cable, just failed. The captain laughed through it. Actually laughed, like the ocean showed up to help him. Lightning started popping close enough to make the air taste like pennies. I tried to get my mouth on the radio mic anyway, even with the antenna gone, just out of spite, and he jabbed the pipe toward my face. Lightning took the mast and him with it. Straight strike. 1 second he was screaming in Milwaukee. Next second he was gone in blue-white flash and burn ozone. A chunk of smoking fabric slapped the rail, and the smell hit. Hair, plastic, meat, metal, all mixed. I still smell him when I microwave popcorn. We didn't cheer. We didn't even talk. We just worked like animals. We got the life raft loose, fought it over the side, watched it inflate, clipped ourselves in because none of us trusted the ship anymore. The storm didn't drift away. It just stopped. Wind died. Rain cut off. Silence dropped so fast it made my ears ring. The sea went calm again like it never happened, but the ship stayed wrong. Bow heavy, pumps still pounding. At first light, we drifted half-flooded and exhausted. We stared at the engine room, hatched like it might cough Ramos back up. It didn't. Hours later, a Coast Guard cutter found us anyway. Like luck decided to spit us out instead of swallow. They pulled us aboard, wrapped Lee's arm, taped my shoulder, asked for our position history and Mayday logs. We had nothing. No AIS track. No EPIR. No Mayday ever recorded. The officer's face tightened like we were wasting his time. Later they told us their weather guy saw nothing on satellite for that patch. No cell, no squall line, like the storm didn't exist until it was on top of us. Back on shore, they split us up and questioned us again. Same questions, different tone. Why would a captain shut off safety gear? Why didn't we stop him? Why didn't we report earlier? I told them about the pipe, about my shoulder, about Lee's arm, about the locked hatch and the cut wires. A company rep showed up and started talking over us, smiling too hard, pushing the word accident like he'd rehearsed it. I told him to shut the fuck up, and he threatened me with defamation, like that mattered more than a missing man and a captain who tried to cave our heads in. I signed my statement anyway. I kept repeating the same detail. His limp vanished when he swung, like the act woke him up. The investigator wrote it down without looking at me, and that felt worse than being called a liar. They boarded the ship and found the through-hull valve wide open, bilges high, alarms screaming. They went down for Ramos. They came up with his flashlight and nothing else. No body, no clear trail, just wet metal and that same sharp salt stink trapped in the stairwell. They called it mechanical failure. I call a murder-suicide the triangle half-finished. To whatever lives under that pencil line, and to any captain who thinks crew are just ballast, let's not meet.